She scrubbed his floors for 30 days. She served champagne at his engagement party while his girlfriend laughed at her shoes. What neither of them knew, what nobody in that room knew, was that the woman holding the tray was the one his father had already signed the empire over to. The uniform was deliberately 2 sizes too big. Florence Yun had chosen it that way, shapeless, forgettable, the kind of thing that made people look through you instead of at you. She stood at the service entrance of the Quan estate at 6:47 in the morning, plastic bucket in each hand, hair pulled flat under a cotton headscarf, and told herself for the 14th time that this was necessary. She was 28 years old, founder of FY Capital, a private equity firm that held controlling interest in 11 companies across Seoul, Tokyo, and Singapore. First net worth, $2.3 billion. And she was here to scrub marble, not because she had lost anything, because she needed to see something she couldn't see from a boardroom. 3 months ago, her father had placed a contract on her desk, a merger. 2 families, 2 empires, 1 signature. The other name on the document, Do Won Kwon. She had looked it up, then looked deeper, then deeper still, until she found the edges of something that didn't sit right. Shell companies. Staff turnover that was too clean. A household that ran too quietly for the kind of man the street said Do Won was. She didn't sign. Instead, she made a call, built a cover identity, and walked through a service entrance. If I'm going to be bound to this man, she told no one, I need to know who he actually is when no one important is watching. Inside, the estate gleamed. Cold, perfect, expensive. A woman's laughter floated down from the upper floor. Sharp, practiced. The laugh of someone performing for an audience of 1. Florence picked up her cloth. She didn't know yet that she was the audience. What would you do? Walk away from a $2 billion arrangement or go undercover to find the truth first? Drop your answer below. Her name was Seo Yeon. Florence learned it the way she learned everything in this house, by being invisible enough that people forgot to lower their voices. Seo Yeon Park, 26, former model. Currently Do-won's girlfriend of 8 months and, as of last Tuesday, his fiancée. She descended the staircase at 9 a.m. in silk loungewear, phone raised, already filming herself. She walked past 3 staff members without acknowledgement. Past the cook, past the groundsman. I passed Florence on her knees at the baseboard the way you walked past furniture. Then she stopped. She turned back with the slow curiosity of someone who had just noticed something mildly interesting. You. She pointed at Florence. You're new. Yes, ma'am. Seo Yeon tilted her head. What's your name? Florence. A small smile. Do you speak properly? You look like you might be slow. Florence looked up once. Steady. I understand instructions well, ma'am. Seo Yeon laughed, the same sharp practiced sound from upstairs, and turned to her friend trailing behind her. I like her. She's got this sad, dignified thing going on. She glanced back. I'm hosting an engagement party Saturday. You'll serve. Of course. Wear something that doesn't embarrass me. Another laugh. Actually, let's wear exactly what you're wearing. It'll be funnier. She walked away. Florence returned to the baseboard. Her jaw was perfectly still. Her hands were perfectly steady. But behind her eyes, she was already recalculating. She's performative, Florence noted. She needs an audience for cruelty. That means she's afraid of something. The question was what, and whether Do Won knew. Florence had expected a monster. What she found was more complicated. Do Won Kwon moved through his own estate like a man who had learned to occupy space without disturbing it. Quiet, precise. He issued no unnecessary commands. He learned every staff member's name within the first week. She'd watched him do it deliberately, stopping in corridors, asking, remembering. He had not yet learned hers. She was careful about that. She observed him the way she observed balance sheets, looking for the gap between the presented number and the real one. What she found, he rose at 5 a.m. He ate alone. He spent 3 hours in a locked office that no household staff entered. He was unfailingly polite to people Seo Yeon treated as furniture. And twice, Florence had caught him standing in the east corridor, outside what the staff called the old room, not entering, just standing, with an expression she recognized because she had worn it herself. The expression of someone carrying something they hadn't put down in years. On Thursday, he passed her in the kitchen corridor. She was restocking. He was carrying his own coffee, which no one in his position should have been doing. He stopped. "You're Florence." Not a question. She looked up. "Yes? Oh, sir." He studied her for exactly 2 seconds. The quick, involuntary assessment of a man whose survival had always required accurate first readings. "The East Corridor baseboards need attention," he said. "But not before the main rooms. Don't let Seo Yon redirect your schedule without checking with Mrs. O first." He walked on. Florence stood very still. He's protecting the staff from her, she thought. Quietly, without making it a conflict. She filed it. It complicated everything. Saturday arrived dressed in flowers and cruelty. The engagement party was Seo Yon's production entirely. 200 guests, a live quartet, enough champagne to fill the fountain twice. The kind of event designed not to celebrate love but to announce arrival. Florence wore the uniform, as instructed. She carried the tray, she poured. She moved through the crowd with the practiced invisibility of someone who had spent 30 days perfecting it, and she listened. She was good at listening. By 9 p.m., she had collected the following: 2 conversations about Do One's shipping company that referenced numbers inconsistent with public filings. 1 exchange between Seo Yon's father and a man Florence recognized from a sanctions list she'd reviewed 6 weeks ago. And 1 whispered argument behind the East Terrace door that stopped the moment she passed. She kept walking. At 9:40, Seo Yon found her near the drink station. "Florence." Bright, carrying, designed for the people around her to hear. "Come here." She crossed the room. Seo Yon gestured to her friends. 4 women with the particular amusement of people watching something they find entertaining at no personal cost. I was just telling them about our new maid." She smiled. "Tell them where you went to school." Florence looked at her pleasantly. "I didn't attend anywhere notable, ma'am." "See?" Seo Yon laughed. Honest, at least. The friends absorbed this with soft sounds of amusement. Florence smiled and returned to the tray, and across the room, through the crowd, she felt eyes on her. She looked. Do One was standing near the east wall. He had watched the entire exchange. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw was tight. He looked away first. Florence looked down at her tray. He saw it, she thought, and it cost him something. She found it on Sunday, in his office. Not by breaking in, but by being the person assigned to clean it while he was off-site. Standard rotation, Mrs. O handed her the key without ceremony. Florence spent the first 10 minutes cleaning. The next 10 she spent reading. Not his personal files. Those were locked. What she found was left in plain sight on the corner of his desk. A single folder labeled in handwriting she didn't recognize. FY Capital, Personal. She opened it. Inside, a photograph of her father. A printed copy of the merger contract. The one she hadn't signed. And beneath it, a handwritten note in Do One's own hand covering 3 pages. She read it standing up. It was not what she expected. He had written it like a man working something out. Not a business analysis. Something raw. He had written about the arrangement with language that had no strategy in it. He'd written about why he hadn't pushed for her signature. Why he'd told his own lawyers to let it sit. "I won't bind someone to this life who hasn't chosen it," he'd written. "I know what this house costs. I won't ask someone to pay it without knowing the price first." Florence stood in his office for a long time. Outside, the estate moved through its Sunday quiet. She thought about the merger contract on her own desk, unsigned. She thought about a man who rose at 5 a.m. and carried his own coffee and stood outside a locked room with grief on his face. She put the folder back exactly as she'd found it, but when she left, her hands weren't steady anymore. This story is getting intense. Do you think Florence should reveal herself or wait? Comment what you do. She didn't plan it. She was in the kitchen at 2 a.m. Same reason as always, couldn't sleep, too much building in her head. When she heard him come in, he stopped in the doorway when he saw her. "You're awake," he said. "Couldn't sleep." He crossed to the kettle without asking. the way a man moved in a kitchen he'd been alone in many times. He set 2 cups down. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then, "Why do you stay?" he asked, not unkindly. "You're too precise for this work. You clean like someone who was briefed on cleaning, and you listen like someone who knows what to do with what they hear." Florence looked at the cup in front of her. "The work is fine," she said. "That's not an answer." She looked up. He was watching her with the same 2-second assessment from the corridor, but longer this time. "I needed to understand something," she said carefully, before making a decision. Something shifted in his expression. "Oh, about what?" "About whether a place deserves to be invested in." She held his eyes, or walked away from. The kitchen was very quiet. "And?" he asked. "I haven't decided yet." He was silent for a moment, then quietly, "My father built something I didn't ask for. I've spent 10 years trying to determine if it can become something worth keeping." He paused. "I understand the question you're asking, even if I don't know why you're asking it from this particular position." Florence said nothing. But for the first time in 30 days, her cover felt like a cage. It was Seo Yon who found the folder. Florence didn't know how. Maybe she'd been watching Duan more carefully than anyone realized. Maybe the Sunday rotation had been noted. But on Monday morning, Seo Yan arrived in the kitchen where Florence was working with the expression of a woman who had found a weapon and was deciding where to aim it. She placed the FY Capital folder on the counter. "You went through his office." Florence looked at it, steady. "I was assigned to clean it." "And read private documents?" "I cleaned the desk." Seo Yan's eyes narrowed. "I ran your name this morning, Florence Yun." She let it sit. Nothing. No address that checks out. No employment history beyond 8 weeks. She tilted her head. "Who are you really?" Florence said nothing. "Do one." Seo Yan turned. He was standing in the doorway. She'd timed this for an audience. "Your maid has been going through your personal files. I want her removed today." Do Wan looked at Florence. His face was unreadable, but his eyes weren't. Is that true?" he asked quietly. Florence held his gaze. The moment balanced on its edge. She could explain. She could show him the card in her pocket with her real name on it. Instead, she said, "I'll pack my things." Because she needed to know what he would do when it cost him something. He said nothing as she walked out, and that silence, as that careful, complicated silence, broke something open in her chest that she hadn't expected to feel. She was at the service gate with her bag when Mrs. O found her. The head housekeeper stood in the early morning cold and looked at Florence with the expression of a woman who had outlasted every version of this household and recognized a crisis when it wore a uniform. "He didn't ask me to come," Mrs. O said. "I came because I've been in this house 11 years, and I know the difference between someone who doesn't belong here and someone who came here for a reason." Florence looked at the gate. "He's in his office," Mrs. O said. "He hasn't taken a call. He hasn't moved." A pause. "In 11 years, I have never seen that man unsettled by a staff departure." Florence said nothing. "Whatever you came here to find out," Mrs. O said quietly, "did you find it?" Florence thought about the folder, the handwritten note. "I won't bind someone to this life who hasn't chosen it." She thought about 2 a.m. and 2 cups of tea, and a man who had seen through her cover in the first week and said nothing. Who had watched Seo Yan humiliate her at the party and let his jaw go tight and looked away because confronting it directly would have cost the wrong person. She thought about 30 days of watching someone be quietly, stubbornly decent in a house that didn't reward decency. She put her bag down, took the card from her pocket, looked at it once, Florence Yun, founder and CEO, FY Capital, and walked back through the service entrance. Not the service entrance, through the front door, for the first time. The choice wasn't difficult. It was the only honest thing left. Do-won was at his desk when she walked in. He looked up. His expression moved through 3 things quickly, surprise, relief, something he immediately controlled. She placed the card on his desk. He looked at it for a long time. Then, "How long?" "The merger contract came 3 months ago. I didn't sign it. I needed to know who you were before I made a decision about my future." Silence. You scrubbed my floors, he said. Taught for a month. Your East Corridor baseboards were genuinely terrible. Something broke in his expression. Not quite a smile, but the place where a smile came from. The folder, he said. You read it. I did. Then you know I never intended to pressure you into... I know. She sat across from him. I also know about the shell accounts, the man at the party on the sanctions list, the shipping numbers that don't match public filings. She held his eyes. I know what this empire is built on, and I know you've spent 10 years trying to build something different on top of it. His jaw tightened. That's not a small thing to ask someone to walk into. No, she said. Oh, it isn't. Then why are you still here? Florence looked at him across the desk. This man who carried his own coffee and learned every name, and stood outside locked rooms with grief on his face and wrote 3 pages by hand about why he wouldn't trap someone in a life they hadn't chosen. Because the question was never whether to sign the contract, she said quietly. It was whether the man attached to it was worth staying for. The office was absolutely still. And? He asked. I stayed, she said. That's your answer. Seo Yan left that evening. Not asked, she left because the name Florence Yoon had reached her phone by 4 p.m. attached to a net, worth that made the engagement ring feel like a joke she'd told badly. The merger contract was signed 6 weeks later, but that wasn't the part that mattered. What mattered was Tuesday morning, on Florence at the kitchen table. Do-Won setting down 2 cups without asking, sitting across from her in the quiet before the house woke up. No uniforms, no trays, no performance. Just 2 people who had chosen each other in the most honest way possible. By watching and staying anyway. Florence went undercover to test a man and found someone worth staying for. Have you ever had to look beneath the surface to find someone's true character? Drop your story below. And if this moved you, subscribe. Because every story we tell starts exactly here.